Hello and welcome to Zenatta Consulting's monthly webinar. This is our April webinar on Zoho People Overview and Best Practices from Zenatta Consulting. I'm Brett Martin.
And I'm Tyler Colt.
And let's get right into it. Before we do, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box and we'll either answer them during the show live or we will get to them at the very end in our Q&A section. And if you just got general chat, just drop that in the chat. And with that, let's get right into it. So our agenda for today is going to be pretty tight. Zoho People, as you will see, is a monster application that just has so many features. So what we're going to do is kind of give you just how to really get set up with it initially, but we are going to do a complete overview of all of the features as well. And we'll kind of go in through some the basic things you will need to go ahead and get this set up. So let's talk about HR software for a little bit. So human resources management system, there are just a bunch of these that are out there. And really, there's just a ton of reasons you want to have them. They really keep track of all of your employees, what shifts you have, what your payment is, what groups, what your organizational structure is, time tracking, shift management, employee training, storage of all of your documents, reporting. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and you'll kind of see that. But, you know, once you get up past a certain number of employees, and it doesn't have to be a lot, it gets very difficult to keep track of all of the various things that you have to keep track of, leave and vacation, and like we said, on and on. So a nice HRMS really helps you keep track of that in a very concise way so that nothing falls through the cracks. And with that, we're going to get into just kind of a general overview here of the various features of Zoho People.
And so we'll kind of do as we normally do on our webinars and run down the kind of primary panels and just talk through, what each of these different components can mean for you. So getting started here, we'll start off just with the home page. This is a customizable page. You can set things up to be different based on, different users. But at the end of the day, the home page is going to provide you a set of different widgets and quick reports that allow you to get started on your day. So kind of looking down the list, anything from checking in for your attendance schedule. You can highlight everyone's birthdays that day, any new hires. Quick links there, kind of on the middle right-hand side of the screen is really nice. So if you have certain documents or pages that you want someone to be able to get to quickly from their homepage, you can just create a quick link for them as well. Additional things you can have here are either, approval requests that need to go through, announcements for the teams, and various other kind of primary elements. It's a lot like the homepage in your CRM or in Zoho Books, where it's just going to give you that top down kind of all the primary stuff that you need as you get started with your day.
And as you're going to kind of show with all of the various modules, features, and settings, there are probably going to be 10 to 12 of these things you really want to care about and have a quick look. And this is just kind of a nice place to just see what's going on.
Exactly. And so kind of moving down the sidebar here over on the left, again, as you click any of these elements, it's going to open up on the right kind of a window of that section. So next we can go ahead and move on to the self-service. This again is going to be for your individual users. So in here, someone could come in and update the phone number they want to have on file. They can update, I guess you wouldn't really update your birthday, but they could add that for the first time, kind of a variety of different information. It also displays some stuff that maybe they can't edit, like their department or who they directly report to, right? If I'm just a normal user, I'm probably not able to make those changes myself. From the self-service as well, they kind of have a whole section for, putting in time off requests, checking in, checking out, seeing any assets that you might have on file. So for the normal user, if you're not kind of an admin or manager, this is probably the only page they'll really need other than the homepage, because it's just going to give them a little bit more detail about any of the various things that they might have going on within Zoho People. Kind of moving down the page, we'll next take a look at the time off requests. So within here, you can kind of see the time off that you have accrued via all these various different ways that you might accrue time off, anything from your standard annual PTO, medical leave, bereavement leave, any of those kind of elements. So you can quickly just go ahead and see, how much time do I have accrued? If you're a manager, you can filter this based on the different users, of course. And then from this page as well, a user can actually go ahead and submit a request for time off. I will highlight a lot of those things when I say kind of like a user can do something here. They could likely also do that at the self-service portal. So you could also put in a time off request there. But if a user wants to pull in and quickly see kind of which types of leave they have available, they could start here and then submit their time off request that way. Kind of next, we'll move into the time tracker, and I'll want to delineate that there are kind of two different ways of tracking time within Zoho People, and they're just used in different scenarios. So the time tracker here is really if you're tracking time on a project basis. This actually integrates to Zoho projects if you use that as well. So if people are tracking time against certain project tasks, that can all roll up here into Zoho People for you to report on it and kind of see it within the rest of your HR tools. So as they pull that up, they'll see there's kind of that expanded left bar there. And so you could go ahead and see, any time tracked against certain jobs, which would be like a task, against certain projects or clients. And then, of course, you have a variety of different reports and settings to dive into there as well. So again, this really comes into play if you're doing project work, is when you're going to want to use time tracker, versus kind of the other side of the coin for tracking attendance and time is using the attendance module. So with attendance, this is where you're going to want to look if you are working with a shift schedule versus, a project basis. So, maybe an hourly employee might make more sense to have them tracking time on projects versus someone who's on a salary, kind of just expected to be there for 8 hours a day. You'd likely be using attendance. Within here, without going into too much detail, because we're going to touch on that a little later, there's a variety of different settings here. Anything from if you want to include weekends and holidays, how you want to calculate your overtime, if you want to have strict or lenient check-in. So there's a whole bunch of settings here that, when you roll this out, you're going to want to go just line by line and kind of choose each of those individually, because there's a lot to it that'll affect how reporting comes out. But again, attendance here is kind of what you would use for your primary shift tracking and, attendance when you're not doing something specifically for a project.
Yeah, and we are, like we said, this is an overview webinar. You look at these menus, and we talk about this often. I mean, you could probably do an entire webinar just on each one of these modules alone to kind of take you through all of the detail, because there is just a ton of detail as you go through these.
Exactly. Kind of the next one down here is performance. And this is actually something that Zoho has been working on a ton over the past year within Zoho People. So the performance module is kind of where you would go to set certain goals for people and then track their progress against those goals. The goals are pretty flexible, so you can kind of set them across a variety of different things. Maybe if you have someone in customer service, you want to set a certain goal for their feedback rating from clients. Maybe for a sales rep, you want to set a goal based on closing percentage or lead conversion. Now, I will say when you're pulling in some of those metrics from other apps, we're not always going to integrate and automatically show that here, but you can set up the goals and then the appraisal cycles to kind of give them feedback against those goals just using this. Again, as you'll see with this setting, there's just a ton that you can do using the performance module. But again, as a kind of primary way to look at it, it's goal setting and then progress against those goals, which can be really important and valuable for employee retention, right? Kind of making sure that people always have something that they're working towards and places to improve on. Kind of next here would be moving into files. So as you would expect, there's a whole bunch of different files that you might want to keep on track here. This could be anything from files specifically for an employee, maybe their W-2 or W-9 information that you want to just track in here and have a consolidated place to store it. These can also include like documents sent out via e-signature, personal uploads in case there's anything kind of outside the norm that you want people to be able to upload and track. You can go ahead and just do all of that through the file management. And moving on, and we'll dig into this one in more detail here in one of our later sections, but you do have your whole set of organization settings. So this covers everything from, the list of your employees, which departments you have, which designations specific employees fall into, which in this case, you can think about it just like a job title. Through all of this, again, you can set up an org tree, track any of your new hires, your different groups. There's a whole bunch that you can do here, but it's kind of your most top level group of settings that just apply across the organization as a whole. Next, we'll jump into travel. So within Zoho People, you can actually go ahead and run all of your travel requests. You can run claims against certain travel items that may have already been made, right? So maybe someone goes ahead and books a hotel for a trade show. They want to go ahead and put that through here as a travel expense. They can actually run that through Zoho People, and then that can go through your standard approval process to make sure that everything is on the up and up there. So they can both kind of put in a request for the future or log an expense that they've already made just through the travel section. We're kind of moving down here. Of course, we're going to need to track compensation. There's kind of three primary buckets that we'll use to track that. First would be assets, right? So maybe if you're giving out laptops or phones, things like that you want to track as a form of compensation. You can track any of your various benefits in here. And then, of course, you're able to track wages, both at a salary or hourly basis, just depending on the specific team member that you'd like to track it for. Next, of course, there's going to be some reporting and analytics that we can do through Zoho People. I will highlight there's also a connector over to Zoho Analytics, kind of the full powered BI suite. But just here within Zoho People itself, you're able to create quick reports, maybe an attendance log, maybe check in and check outs, maybe you want to pull a report on different assets that have been given out. Kind of any of these various things that you're able to track and input into People, you can then pull reports on just through this analytics tab.
And there are no canned reports that come with Zoho People, which is interesting. Most Zoho apps will give you a whole series of canned reports. I think just because of the how highly configurable nature of Zoho People, you're really going to want to build your own type of reports to look what you want to here. But they're really straightforward, and the wizard for building these reports is really nice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then moving on from analytics, we'll go ahead and jump into the task management here within Zoho People. So, as with any Zoho app, it's going to have its own set of tasks and workflows to create those. Based on the different workflow settings, you can generate tasks for anything from, asset purchase approvals, time off requests, onboarding tasks, kind of any of these various processes that you want to run can come with their own whole set of tasks that you can then assign out to particular people. And they're able to track those and kind of check them off running down a list just using the tasks reporting. Now, the next tab here is one that's new kind of throughout the course of 2020. So they do have a full office readiness suite here. This is anything from being able to collect health information. You might have some different approval requests that you need to run based on maybe people being remote. And then, of course, there's kind of a new suite of approval notifications that go out using Office Readiness, again, kind of built for a remote model. So it's an important one here as people start to head back to the office. It gives you kind of a nice way to just track those things as people actually go back to being in person.
But wait, there's more. There's so much that they can't fit it on one sidebar.
And so a couple here that we'll just touch on at a high level. So cases is where you're going to track anything that might be, issue related or query related, right? So we're able to kind of post that here. It kind of also serves as an FAQ. So as you solve problems, you can then log them to a bank of shared knowledge that people can access at will. Next one down the list would be announcements. We don't really need to dive into that. That's just going to be, new hire announcements, birthday announcements. You can kind of customize some various rules there. A big one that they launched not too long ago here is actually their LMS within Zoho People. So an LMS is a learning management system. And with this LMS and People, you can set up a variety of different courses, trainers, and sessions to kind of work people through specific blocks of content, kind of bring them up to speed as part of a kind of a tail end of an onboarding process. Or it could be if you institute a new policy or procedure and you want to build out a course for people to learn it, you could do that here as well.
Yeah, and Zoho has also recently launched, it hasn't been made public, but it is available to the public, a standalone LMS. So for those of you listening to this as we're doing it, you can go to learn.zoho.com and check out their full-blown LMS. And actually, they seem very similar, Tyler. I think that there are a lot of shared components between the two.
Yep. And then lastly here down at the very bottom left, so we'll have the cog for kind of the full settings wheel here. Within these settings, you have everything from, kind of your account information, a top down of any employees and user profiles. Some of these I will highlight are actually going to navigate you to the settings within some of those other tabs. So some of it might be a little duplicated. Of course, we can customize things, create custom forms. As with most Zoho applications, you can actually run Deluge inside of here, and you can build those in custom actions. Down in the bottom left is an important one as you kind of get going. You can manage various automations. These would be, on an approval to something, send an email. When an onboarding is complete, notify someone, right? Kind of a variety of different tools there. And then over on the right is a pretty important section to be aware of, in just that there's a ton of additional help material that Zoho will make available. A good place to start is with this Getting Started tab. If you click that, it's going to pull open kind of some of the core A1 things that you're going to set up when you roll out Zoho People. So if you're going to get started with this on your own, that's always a good way to start, just by kind of checking off some of these core elements like your organization settings, getting your users set up, getting some of your different leave policies and shifts. And then, of course, setting things up to get some feedback and approvals for your various timesheets. Again, this might not cover everything that you'd want to set up, but it's a good place to start if you're kind of looking at this and it's seeming like a ton of different settings, right? You can kind of break it down into bite-sized chunks and work through them that way.
All right. It's a testament to just how feature-rich Zoho People is that we basically spent almost 20 minutes just going over the menu options that you have inside of Zoho People. So what we're going to do now is once you were, if you were to look at this, how do you get set up with it? So first of all, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set up your overall organization settings. So to do that, you actually are going to go into the settings menu and you're going to click on company details. And once you go in here, you're basically just going to set up the things that you need to do for your company. You can put your company name in, your address, your company logo, your time zone, where you're located, all your notification settings, just the basic stuff. This is very similar to if you have used any other Zoho application and you're setting up your organization. This is virtually identical to that. So it's just basically setting up all that standard information around who you are and where you're located in time zones and such. Next, to set up your organization, you're going to also in the settings tab want to go to departments. And this is where you set up all of your basic departments. So here we've got some examples to give you an idea what we're talking about. Human resources, IT, your sales department. You can go on and on. You can have an operations department, whatever you need. It's extremely easy to go ahead and add any different department you want. And then you're also going to go ahead and associate your employees with each and every one of those departments. So as you click into it, you'll know who's where. And this then kind of can tie into an organizational org chart rather than a hierarchical org chart. There's a lot of different ways to slice and dice this data once you go through it. And then continuing and setting up your organization, you've got that set up. You have the organization set up. You can now then go ahead and set up your designations. So designations is another way it's basically just another word for job titles. So this is where you're actually going to set up your job titles. So maybe you want to have a vice president of HR, you want to have a VP of dev, you can have all these things. You have programmers, senior consultants, all the basic job titles that anyone would have. This is where you're going to go ahead and set up your job titles and then associate the people who have those titles with every designation that you've gone ahead and set up. And again, you can add as many designations as you would like. Next is your locations. So I really think, Zoho has thought of everything here. So in your locations, you're designating them not only by country, but by area in that country. You can get extremely granular with your locations. And again, this is employee association. So once you've got your users set up, you're actually associating all of your users with the various locations where they are in your company. So if you're a company with multiple locations, multiple countries, this is where you will be able to set all of that up. And again, extremely easy to go ahead and add a location as well as import locations. As you're going through a lot of the settings, this import feature is available on several of them. And if you click on that, you actually can download a template that's going to say, hey, here's exactly how you need to lay out this import in an Excel spreadsheet. So it'll give you all the columns and all the headings. You can go ahead and put all the data in there, usually much easier than entering it manually into the Zoho People one by one. Once you go ahead and you do that, you can go ahead and import all of your locations all at once. And then we're going to move on to roles. And this is really what people can do inside of the Zoho People. So what can they see? So an admin can see various things and a data admin can see various things and managers. So, different than titles, these are actually their roles and what their access is inside People, what modules they can see, what they can do, all of those kind of things. And again, you can always add a specific role and tighten that up. And if you're familiar with any other Zoho application, this is just very similar to that, same as CRM. Then moving along, domains. So a lot of Zoho applications allow you to set up a custom domain. If you're familiar with Zoho Desk, you've got outside people that want to access this and they're going to look at it. You don't necessarily want them going to a, Zoho Desk / your portal name / you want it to be very customized. You want them to go to Zenatta.com. So in this case, you can go ahead and set up your custom domain and you're going to go ahead and put it in there. In this case, we're running on a demo account. They put this in, but maybe you wanted to do something like hr.zenatta.com. You're going to go ahead and you're going to set that up on your DNS server. And also you're going to want to make sure that emails from this are going to come through as well. So you're going to want to set up something called a DKIM setting. And to do that, what you're going to do is going to click get this details, and it's going to give you the basic information that you need to add to your DNS server to set this up. If you're unfamiliar with this, we have in, I believe, if you go to our YouTube channel, we talk about how to set this up in our Zoho Mail and in our CRM. And I think we've got several of them because most applications are going to require that you have this set up in your DNS. It's very, very, very simple to set up. If you don't manage your own DNS, this is something that will take no more than 2 to 3 minutes for your webmaster to do, whoever sets up your DNS. But this is going to give you the settings you need to go ahead and get that set up. And then lastly, this is kind of an interesting thing when setting all this stuff up, is that sometimes everything doesn't sit over in settings. Sometimes the settings that you need actually sit over in the main menu, in all of the settings that are off of that. So you're gonna want to go ahead and also set up your calendar settings, and you're gonna find that under the time off section, which I believe is sometimes called leave inside of Zoho. It depends on which version of Zoho People you have. And then you can go ahead and set up your general calendar sessions. So what is calendar settings? It's when do people work? They work Monday through Friday at all of our locations, and that's just a general setup. Everybody's got the same work week, but maybe you have people that have different work week, and you've got different types of things. So you can easily go ahead and add something different and set up a completely different time off section or calendar for whatever, maybe a location. Maybe you've got a location that works Sundays to Fridays, or maybe there's just ones that are there only on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or something like that. They've got various things. That's where you would go ahead and set that up. And then additionally, you can go ahead and set up your pay period settings. And again, when are you paying your people? So it's all the standard information you would think. So I pay my people biweekly, I pay them weekly, I pay them monthly. Our work week is Monday through Friday. We process payroll on Friday. The payroll report's generated on Monday. They get paid a week after. And it really will kind of tell you down here. Once you set this up, it's going to give you a really, really good idea of, okay, here's what you're doing. Here's when paycheck's going to be processed. Here's what it's going to be for. And you kind of get all of that information. So it kind of guides you through this in a very, very easy way. And you can also, since you've set up your locations, you can basically say what locations this payroll is for. And then once you've got ahead and set that up, you have all of your various pay periods set up as well. And so that's your base configuration for just the organization. So once you've kind of got all of those things set up, your organization is set up, and now you need to get into some of the real nitty gritty. So these are just real kind of short little setups that you need to do. And the very first one is going ahead and adding a user.
Yeah, so to go ahead and add a user, we'll first jump back into the settings page here, which is the cog in the bottom left. Under the organization settings here, we'll have a tab for users. If we go ahead and open that up, we'll see that we have 2 different users kind of just already added, right? So that'll give you a list of everyone who joined. what their current role is, where their location is, and whether they're active or inactive. So that'll kind of give you a top down. And then to actually add a new one up there in the top right, we can either add or import. Again, like Brett mentioned, if you do pull down the import section, you're able to download an example file. That's oftentimes a nice way to do it. If you're setting this up from scratch and you've got 30 or 40 different employees, you're going to want to do it that way. Just pull down that export. It'll give you the column headers that you need. And then when you go to import it, it'll just be super easy and save you some time. If you're just going to add one user independently, then you can go ahead and just do that add button and go ahead from there.
It's important to note here that when you're adding people, if you're in Zoho 1, every person that's part of your payroll system will have to be Zoho 1. If not, you're going to actually need to go ahead and add people into Zoho as a user, and you're going to actually have to buy those user licenses before you can add them in.
Yeah, so if you're doing a kind of bulk import of 20 people, you'd go ahead and set up those 20 licenses, then do your import so that those users have some open seats that they can fill inside your subscription. And then lastly, a couple nice little features here is that you can actually import directly from users of some other systems. So if you already had everyone set up, for example, in Zoho Mail or in Google or Office 365, you can actually just go ahead and sync your users in from there. Sometimes you might have to make some adjustments after the fact, right? If you have some locations or role information that might be unique to Zoho People. But it'll at least get you the baseline of pulling everyone's name, email, phone, a lot of that core information into the system. And then you'll probably need to go back and kind of touch it up just a little bit to add some of those fields that might not currently live in those other applications.
Yeah, and in order for this to be successful, you'll want to count the number of users. If you're doing this sync, you're definitely going to want to make sure you have the proper number of licenses available before you go ahead and you run that sync. All right, now let's move into setting up leave. So this is basically where you are doing your overall policy for any type of leave that an employee may have. Again, you're going to go to time off and you're going to go to time off type. And once you're here, as you can see, these are kind of the basic things that you would want to set up for time off. And you can determine if they're paid or unpaid. This is a very stingy company. They don't pay for holidays. They don't really pay for anything, just for PTO days. So really, when you set these up, you're setting up, is this an approved type of leave? Is it paid for? Is it not? What are our basic plans around this? And you can go ahead and set that up. And as always, you can add new time off as well. So very, very detailed here. You can say how they're accruing the time towards this time off, if it carries forward, how many hours they can carry forward, how many days they can carry forward, if it's paid, if it's unpaid, all of these type of things. And you could just a ton of options around setting up your various time off and your various areas of time off. And that's going to take us to setting up attendance.
Yeah, so again, attendance here is kind of the time tracking that's based on shift schedules, but we'll go ahead and jump into some of the general settings here and talk through kind of how that generally ends up working out. So as we go into the general settings, we'll see kind of some of the core information here. So you can set up, when this is effective from, you can set up your default shift times. We're not going to dive too much into shift tracking, but you can actually, I should say we're not going to dive into that right now. That'll be our next section. You can set a default shift time here that you want to track attendance for. Big one here, if you want to have your hours calculations, a lot of those become really important for actually, exporting this into a payroll system. So you can say if you want to check it based on first and last of the day, or if your employees are going to be checking in and checking out, do I want to stop that timer, right, and not give them credit for any time within one day that they weren't checked in? When you get into your kind of work hours tracking, you can look at either doing it with a strict tracking or lenient tracking, which is basically, if you had a shift that was from 12 to 4 and someone was to check in early, should that count? Should that not count? Kind of how should that roll into all their various hours reporting?
And we're not sure what state you could get away with strict mode in, but
yeah, most of the time you're probably going to want to be on lenient mode.
Exactly.
You can choose whether or not to show overtime. I will say, and we'll dive into this, actually, one of the users asked us about some limitations, so I'll save some of that for then. Overtime tracking with Zoho People can be hit or miss just depending on your organization. It's one element here that's not as customizable as we would like. So sometimes you might want to turn that off if you're going to be calculating it outside of the system, just to make sure that people aren't seeing any incorrect values. Um, Rolling down the page, we can choose if it should, if people should be able to check in from the web, if people should be able to check in from their phone. A lot of cool work that Zoho has been doing with the check-in functionality. One they released actually kind of recently is checking in with your Face ID. If you have an iPhone, that'll do that. So a couple things you can actually do there to enable people to check in remotely, but try to minimize some of the fears of, people checking in on behalf of other people. Because, if you open a door, someone might walk through it. Lastly, here we can get into the various reminders. So you can have people actually get some reminders if they're supposed to check in on a certain day. I would say, especially when you start off, you're going to want to have all of these on. When it's a new system, people might forget. And if you're going to use it to calculate payroll, you really want it to be accurate. I want to highlight here, just because it's not super clear. If you don't have a certain date and time, like before the shift start time, it won't send the notification. Oftentimes people might enter in 15 minutes and then wonder later, okay, now how do I turn this off? If you just empty those fields back out, that is how you would turn off any of those notifications. I highlight that just because we've gotten a couple questions on it, because you'd expect like an on-off button, but it's really just if you have a date in there, then it's on. Otherwise, it'll be off. And then lastly, you can do some of your regularization settings, right? So that could be if someone wants to say or put in a request like, hey, I need to get my regular hours on this day. I just forgot to check in or I forgot to check out. So there's kind of some tracking around hours adjustments that you might need to make, which is important to set up because there's going to be a little bit of human error and you need to have those on file so that when you need to adjust someone's hours, especially if you're adjusting them down, it's really important to give that reason for why you're doing this, and that they forgot to check out.
All right, so let's move on to setting up shifts. So shift schedules are what you would think they would be. Again, you're going to go into attendance now, and then you're going to go into shift schedule in order to get to this setting. And once you've done that, you kind of got the basic shifts here. So the ones that we've set up here are general, a weekend shift, a 10 to 7 p.m. shift one, a sales and marketing shift. Maybe you've got a group that's working, this is 6 a.m. to 2:30. Maybe you've got an East Coast shift and a West Coast shift. Very, very easy to set up a shift. Here, I'll just go ahead and do a standard one for adding a shift. And what I've done here is just an old-fashioned graveyard shift, someone working from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. You've got the shift margin. You can enable it, whether it's location based, all of the various things you've kind of previously set up. Now, when you go ahead and set up the shift, you can kind of enable those things in the shift. You can basically do these by departments, locations, divisions, where these shifts apply. And this is just kind of the last basic thing you need to set up, getting your basic setup of Zoho People done.
Yeah, and
with
one
that,
interesting thing with these as well is as you're going through, you'll find a lot of settings about how weekends should be handled. And what you can do with these shifts is, let's say you're working, a retail store, and maybe your retail store is actually closed Monday and Tuesday because those are the slowest days of the week. So you could say, you know what, for this shift, let's not use our standard location weekends. Let's say that our weekends for this shift are Monday and Tuesday. Right. So maybe if you ever do have it open, then you could treat that as weekend hours if you're asking someone to work on a day that normally things would be closed down. It's just an important little note because it'll ask about weekends when you get into some of the other tracking elements. So it's important to know that it doesn't have to be Saturday and Sunday if that doesn't work based on the way that a specific shift actually works.
All right, with that, let's jump into our Q&A. What do we have?
Yeah, we got a couple questions in here. First, I'll touch on one from Andre here. Is there a way in Zoho People to keep track of employee work hours where 40 hours a week is the maximum, but if they do more than that, we kind of save excess hours for a future week where they might have logged less than 40 hours? I don't believe so. I don't think they have any hours bank supported within Zoho People, unless you tell me otherwise, Brett.
No, there's no hours bank there. I mean, I imagine, Tyler, there are ways it could be done. tracked outside of that. Maybe, you could do things in CRM or where you're tracking
Hmm.
all of their hours there and they're logging them. And then you could have a function where it would carry it from week to week to week if they had overage and those kind of things, but not in Zoho People.
Hmm.
Then we've got a question from Yuval. Could you touch upon where the integrations are lacking, if you feel they are? Reporting time based on tasks and issues in projects, glitches on the updated reported hours, something we encounter frequently, managing actual assets, not only the assets assigned to the employee, and why you consider People a maybe app.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in on the integrations that are lacking. There's one primary integration that's currently missing that I think is probably one of the bigger reasons that we keep it in the maybe column. It's payroll. Right now, there are no US payroll integrations for Zoho People. Now they did just roll out one for Zoho Books, but that kind of works independently. So I would say that would be kind of the primary drawback right now when you think about integrations and some of the functionality, just because you may want to use a tool that just spouts right into T-Sheets or Sure Payroll or some of those big options. Now Zoho is working on their own payroll product in addition to some integrations with some other payrolls. So I would expect that to change. But as of right now, there's no payroll integration.
Yeah, and I want to expound on that. So, the Sure Payroll integration is exceptionally good with Zoho Books right now, and they are working on some other connectors there that might make this actually amazing. So, Sure Payroll is a paychecks company. Sometimes over at Zenatta here, we are true guinea pigs. So, believe it or not, we moved our entire company payroll from ADP to Sure Payroll so that we could try it out and see how good it was. It's excellent. I've got no complaints about it. So hopefully, I think if that integration, which I hear is coming, happens, then that would be a good thing. Tyler, I'm not sure would keep it off the maybe list. I would say another reason it's on the maybe list is just the sheer complexity of setup. There aren't a lot of wizards. There's not a lot of things to step people through. And I think when you look at some of the other applications that are out there, they're a little simpler to set up. That doesn't mean they don't have the functionality. I think Zoho People is an amazingly functional app, and it's good, but it's a highly complex app. I mean, were there any other things you? I hate to
Yeah, I
focus
would
on
say.
negatives on these kind of things, but I mean, this is the question.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say to one last negative before I'll answer your last question around assets. But one last little negative with it is the way that it looks at overtime. Is that it really is looking at overtime as more than 8 working hours in a day, and it's not always super responsive to your pay period. So like, let's say you had a pay period that was not aligned with a calendar week. When it's calculating like weekly overtime, it struggles if your pay period doesn't line up with those calendar weeks. So if you had like more than 40 hours in a week, but it split that week, maybe the new payroll date was starting on a Wednesday, you'll bump into some issues trying to pull out accurate overtime values. So that's one last little remaining time tracking issue that they're working on, just based on kind of your overtime cadence. And the last one that kind of part of your question here is on assets. They actually did build out under the compensation tab a full log of all assets. In there, you could enter any assets that you have on file, and then you can actually see, when an asset was given, when it was given back, kind of just through that whole process. So they're building out that database feature for actually tracking the assets. It's not going to be as full featured as like what you would see in like a service desk asset tracking, but it's getting better and better.
Yeah, now so Yuval, to answer your last question here, which is also I'm assuming you say, how is People LMS in regards to Zoho Learn? I don't think we can accurately comment on that yet. We're going to be diving into Zoho Learn in a big way here. Now that the final kind of version's out, we're going to dig into that. The thing is, you can actually set that up very easily so that it's just do exactly what Zoho People does. It's not going to have that integration on the back end quite yet. But we'll probably look into two of those and we can comment on that for you in a few weeks on probably one of the CRM Zen shows.
Yep. And then kind of another question here around time off requests. So as you're actually looking at a time off request, if someone were to go ahead and apply leave, that just gets into your settings around how you want to manage those approvals. Um, so by default, you would generally set one up being approved by whoever that employee is directly reporting to. But with that, right, and there's a lot of tools in the toolbox here, but you can set up multi-stage approvals, right? So if I wanted to apply leave to something, maybe I want to say, the first level of approval is going to be to the manager. The second level of approval might be to that manager's manager. And then lastly, at the end, everyone gets notified that it's been completed. The best place to set that up, if you're going to go ahead and actually build it out, you want to go to settings. And then under the automation section, you have a section for approvals. And that'll be the best place. So you can go ahead and add one. It'll give you a variety of different approval types. So, you could do an approval process for an asset, an approval process for a goal, and then, of course, approval process for leave or time off requests there as well. I kind of will point you to that settings page because the advantage is you might have a variety of different approvals. And once you get used to the approvals in the general settings, you can use the same logic for a variety of different types of approvals that you may want to roll out. So I would say start there, and I think you'll be able to kind of piece through exactly how it all is set up.
Very good. Oh, we had one more from Matt here. You said there's something in it for payroll. Is there to export hours so that you can import them into another tool?
You can, yes.
Yep.
You can either pull them through analytics and maybe pre-process them there a little bit, or you can just pull the raw reports out of Zoho People. I will say what oftentimes happens is, just the formatting of things. So oftentimes we end up pulling it into analytics just to like change some column headers, remove some columns that aren't needed, right? And kind of give the raw data that way because you'll be able to format it a little bit more. But at the end of the way, you do have a couple different options to getting data out if you do want to go ahead and import it into your payroll system.
All right. So before we go, I want to thank everybody for participating today. We do have some announcements of some upcoming events. We have 2 webinars coming up in May. The first one is going to be on Zoho Enterprise Solutions and why. And on that, we are going to have a Zoho resource who goes by the name of LSP because his name is extremely long and complicated to pronounce. And so he'll be joining us. He's a Zoho Enterprise expert. He's an analytics expert. He's a huge resource. And we're really going to just kind of do a Q&A on how Zoho can fit into an enterprise solution. And that's going to be on May 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And then 1 week later, Tyler and I will resume with this year's webinar series, running through all the Zoho apps. We're going to be doing Zoho Recruit overview and best practices. Again, that'll be Tuesday, May 18th at 10 a.m. Pacific. And as always, if you want to know any events that are going on in the world of Zoho and not just stuff that we're putting on, head on over to CRM Zen. CRM Zen is kind of an independent site where we publish the CRM Zen show, of course, but we also, all the daily news is coming out of Zoho, and we have an events tab. And if you go to that events tab, you can see everything that's being put on, whether it's by Zoho, by another Zoho partner, by us. We kind of try to keep everything there. So coming up this week, well, today, actually tonight, Zoho is going to be doing on a multi-channel support and time tracking with Zoho Desk. If you're on the East Coast, that'll be at 10 p.m. If you're on the West Coast, 7 p.m. Nothing good on TV, go ahead and drop into that. And then they've got one on Backstage for Administrators, which is going to be this Friday. Anyway, go over to crmzen.com and click on the events tab for more information on that. And as always, we really thank you for watching our webinars, our shows, all the stuff we do. You can find us over at zenatta.com and crmzen.com, and we will answer any of your emails if you just want to go to info at either one of those addresses.
Yeah, and on our websites, it'll be easy for you to find any links out to the YouTube channel where we post all of this content, as well as to a full log of all the podcast episodes that we've ever done. As always, we'd love to have you follow us over on your favorite social media platform and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, as well as on YouTube. We'll see you next month for our webinar on Zoho Recruit.